Okay, and we are back. So, in the last lesson, we finished doing our rough cut of this scene. But now we want to go back and we really want to take a look at the real difference between insert and overwrite editing. So, what I want to do is I want to add a few clips to the beginning of our sequence. Okay, so let's start by doing this. I want to take a little sidetrack, talk a little bit about customizing your keyboard, and I'm going to show you one of the things that I immediately change whenever I start a new user profile. This is something I kind of have to work with on my keyboard before I even get started editing. So let's go ahead and do that first. Okay, so right now I've just been kind of dragging my playhead through my sequence. And what we're going to be doing, we're going to be inserting some clips into our timeline. And if you want to insert clips in between other clips, you need to make sure that your playhead is right on the edit point. Okay, so one way to get your playhead right on an edit point is to hold down the Command key and click near the edit that you want your playhead to snap to. So I'm just holding down the Command key and I'm clicking near these edit points, and my playhead snaps to that edit. However, what I really like to do is I'd like to also use my up and down arrows on my keyboard to jump my playhead from edit point to edit point in my timeline. So we can do that a couple different ways. First of all, over here we have go to previous event and go to next event buttons in the bottom right corner of my record monitor. And I can click on those to jump my playhead from edit point to edit point in my timeline. Okay, but here's how they work. They work by active track selectors. So in a bit, we're going to add some reaction shots to an upper video track. So I'm going to add a new video track to my timeline. Right now I've just got one video track, two audio tracks, but I want to add a second video track. So we can do this by going up to timeline, new video track. The keyboard shortcut is Command Y. That's how I usually create a new video track. But we could also go down to our timeline, right-click somewhere in the timeline, go up to the top of that menu, video track. Okay, so I'm going to hit Command Y. That's going to add a second video track. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make just that video 2 track a little larger. So here's where the track selectors come in. Up until now, I really haven't paid too much attention to the track selectors other than just saying that the green track selectors represent our source monitor and the blue track selectors represent our record monitor. Okay, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn all of these off. I'm just going to click on these so they're no longer highlighted blue or green, except for the video 2 track selector. And then I'm going to hit Command L, and that's going to make just that track taller. Command K will make it shorter. Okay, so I'm going to hit Command L, make that track a little larger. Then I'm going to turn that track off. I'm going to turn my timecode track on, and I'm going to hit Command K just to make that a little smaller because I don't need that timecode track to be very large. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure I'm monitoring the video 2 track and anything underneath it. So over here on the right side of your patch panel, these are monitor buttons. And right now I'm only monitoring the video 1 track, but I want to make sure as I start to put clips up here on video 2, I want to be able to see them in my record monitor as well. So I'm going to turn on monitoring for video 2, and then I'm going to turn all these track selectors back on. Okay, now that I've done that, now when I hit my go to previous event and go to next event buttons, my playhead is jumping all the way to the head of the sequence and the end of the sequence. It's not stopping at all the edits. because the way these buttons work by default is they're looking for the same edit point across all active tracks. And because I've added this new video 2 track and it doesn't have any edits in it, the only place where all 4 tracks share an edit is the beginning and the end of the sequence. Now, if I turn video 2 off, and now I hit my Go to Next Event button, and my Go to Previous Event button, my plate is now stopping at the edits again. Okay, so I want to do 2 things. First of all, I want to turn the way this works off. Okay, I want it to stop at every edit point regardless of what track selectors are on. Then I want to map those to my keyboard. Okay, so let's change the way this works first. Since these buttons by default live under the Composer monitor, this is a Composer setting that we're going to change. So I'm just going to go up to my Composer monitor. It doesn't really matter where. I'm just going to right-click Composer Settings. There are several tabs of settings within your Composer settings. The middle tab is the Move tab. And this determines how those buttons work. And it says, when the Composer or timeline is active, the Go to Next and Previous Event commands do the following. You can have a stop at head frames, meaning the head of the clip, tail frames, stop at markers, ignore track selectors, and stop at keyframes. Okay, so right now we're just here to tell it to ignore the track selectors. I click OK. Now, if I turn the video 2 track on, all the track selectors are back on. If I hit the Go to Next Event or Previous Event commands, it's still going to stop at every edit point regardless of which track selectors are on or off. Okay, so that's step 1. Now to map it to the keyboard. And here's where we're really going to go in and take a deeper look at our user settings or our user preferences, depending on what you want to call them. Technically, user settings in Avid. And we've already actually changed a couple of these user settings, but we haven't gone and taken a look at the settings. So we're going to go up to Avid Media Composer Preferences, or you can go to File, Settings. They're going to take you to the same place. So File Settings or Avid Media Composer Preferences. And there are 4 tabs in our settings. There's our Format, our Project Format, Project Settings. Any of these settings that I change are going to only change the settings for the current project, our Scene 20 project. User settings are the settings that go with your user profile, the thing that we created right before we created our project. Site settings, think of these as settings for the computer that you are sitting at, for the specific hardware computer that you're sitting at. Okay, so we're going to go to user settings. Right at the top, there's your user profile. This is the user profile we created right at the beginning of the class. This is another place that we can switch to other user profiles, create user profiles. You can even export your user profile and then import it to another system. Okay, so we're going to leave it set to our user profile. And then these are all of our user settings. Okay, these are settings of how you like to work with the Avid. So they're in alphabetical order. We're going to go down to keyboard. And there are 5 different keyboards built in to Avid. Okay, there's the default keyboard, which they call the MC English keyboard. There's a variation of that called MC1 English. There's one called NC English. This is for the News Cutter plugin. Okay, so basically if you're using Avid to cut the news, that's what that keyboard is for. They also have a keyboard with Premiere Pro keyboard shortcuts. So if you're a Premiere Pro editor and you want to start out with Premiere Pro keyboard shortcuts, you can do that. And the same thing for DaVinci Resolve. Now, we can also duplicate these settings. So what I want to do is I want to create a custom keyboard. So we can duplicate any of these settings by simply right-clicking on it. So I'm going to right-click on my keyboard for my MC English keyboard, and I'm going to choose Duplicate. And now I have a 6th keyboard. I've got this MC English United States .1, but I'm going to rename this. So on the second column, this is where you can rename the settings. I'm just going to click on this. You can call it anything you want. You can name it after yourself. You can call it editing keyboard, whatever you want. I'm just going to call this Jason's keyboard. Going to hit return. And then I'm going to make this the active setting. To make it the active setting, we simply click the checkbox next to it. Okay, now we haven't really changed the keyboard yet. We've just duplicated our default keyboard, renamed it, and made it active. But now we're going to customize it. So we're going to double click where it says keyboard. And that's going to open up our keyboard map. Now with Avid, you can map the key by itself, or you can hold down the shift key and do shift plus the key. Okay, unlike other programs, you can't do things like shift command, option shift, and all those variations, simply because Avid uses control, option, and command differently within the software. Okay, so it's the key by itself or shift plus the key. Now that really doesn't bother me too much because there are, first of all, a lot of redundancies on the Avid keyboard that I don't mind replacing. For example, you can mark an in and an out by hitting I and O or E and R. So I usually replace E and R with something else and use just I and O to mark in and out points. You can also play a clip by hitting the space bar, the tab key, the tilde key, and the 5 key. Okay, so I don't mind replacing one of those. Okay, or I can simply hold down the shift key, and there's a lot of empty keys with shift plus the key. Now what we're here for are our up and down arrow keys. So if we go over here, right now our up and down arrows are set to move clips up and down in the timeline from one track to another. So I'm going to replace that. I'm going to replace that with our go to previous event, go to next event commands. And we do that with the command palette. So I go up to Tools, Command Palette. Once again, I make sure that button-to-button reassignment is selected. In this case, I'm going to go to the Move tab. And over here, we've got Go to Previous Event, Go to Next Event. So I'm going to grab that Go to Previous Event button. I'm going to drag it to my up arrow. I'm going to grab the Go to Next Event, drag it to my down arrow on my keyboard. And I've replaced those functions with Go to Previous Event, Go to Next Event. Okay, now I close my keyboard. I close my command palette. Before I close my settings, I want to make sure and save my settings. So I'm going to hit Command S, and now I can close my settings. So now when I click on my timeline, I can now use my up and down arrows on my keyboard to jump from edit point to edit point in my timeline. And then once again, just to reiterate, if I want to simply snap my playhead to the nearest edit point, I can hold down the Command key and click near the edit that I want to snap to. Okay, so we're going to start by inserting a few clips at the beginning of our sequence. So using whatever method you want, put your playhead at the beginning of your sequence. So you can either drag it, you can hit the home key, you can hit your up arrow until you're all the way at the beginning of your sequence, or you can command click near the beginning of your sequence. Then we're going to go to our cutaways bin. We're going to put this in frame view. I'm going to hit Command L to make these frames a little larger. I'm going to go to the fast menu in the upper right corner of the bin, align and fill window. Okay, and I just want to add a few of these shots of the things around Rory's desk to the beginning of my sequence. Okay, so we'll start with, I don't know, we'll do the shot of the cat, the hang in there poster. Okay, so I want to mark a couple of seconds of this clip. One thing I try to avoid doing is I try to avoid marking an in point right at the head of the clip or an out point right at the tail of the clip. And that's because if you want to do something later on, like add a transition, like a dissolve or a wipe, you need a little bit of extra footage before the in point and after the out point to create that overlap for that transition to work. We call that extra footage. We call that handles. Okay, so I try to keep from marking a clip right at the beginning of a clip. So I'm going to drag my play at a couple seconds in. I'm going to hit I to mark it in. And then I'm just going to play it for about 2 seconds. I'm going to count it off kind of in my head. I'm going to hit the L key, 1001, 1002. And I'm going to hit O to mark an out. If you want to see the duration from in to out, up here in the middle top of the composer, this is the center duration field. And it's going to show you the marked duration of the active window. Okay, so right now my source monitor is active, and the marked duration of this is 2 seconds and 12 frames. If I were to mark an in and an out in my timeline, I to mark an in, O to mark an out, and click over here, I'm going to see the marked duration in the timeline. So I marked a duration of 15 seconds, 1 frame. But if I click on the source monitor, this switches to show me the marked duration in the source monitor. Okay, now I'm going to clear these in and out points. I'm going to click on my record monitor, and the keyboard shortcut to clear your in and out points is G. G is the keyboard shortcut to clear both marks. By the way, D clears the in, F clears the out, G clears both. Okay, so back to our insert. I want to insert this clip at the beginning of my sequence. So I'm just going to drag my playhead all the way to the beginning of my sequence. I'm going to take a look at my patch panel. So V1 is still patched to V1. That's basically saying the video from this clip is going to go into the video 1 track of the timeline. A1 is patched to A1. My A1 source, green A1 source, is going to go into A1 in the timeline. However, if I play this in to out, I don't like that background noise. I don't want to bring the audio from this clip into the timeline. So I'm going to go over to my green A1 track selector, and I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn it off, and I'm basically saying don't bring the audio into the timeline. I'm going to leave all my other track selectors on, and I'm going to hit the splice in button, or the letter V as in victory, on my keyboard. And that's going to cut that clip in, and it's going to push all the other clips down to the right. It spliced that in, or inserted it, as you might say. And it only brought in the video. It did not bring in the audio. I'm going to drag my playhead back and play it.
Lunchtime. Just a minute.
Okay, I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to insert another clip right here. So I'm going to Command click to snap my play to that edit point. I'm going to load another clip into the source monitor. I'm going to mark a couple seconds of this. I to mark it in. L to play forward. 1001, 1002. O to mark an out. If I look up here, I can see that I marked a little over 2 seconds. And because it's a new clip, I have a new green track select over here. I don't want that audio, so I'm going to turn A1 off. I'm going to leave all these other track selectors on. I'm going to hit the splice in button, or the letter V, on my keyboard. That's going to splice that clip in. It's going to insert it, push all the other clips down to the right. Now, I'm going to show you a potential gotcha. Okay, and this is something you really have to be aware of in Avid, and then I'm going to show you a way that you can avoid it. Okay, let's say I want to insert this clip in. Okay, I'm going to start out by marking it. I'm going to hit I to mark it in, O to mark it out. Let's make it a little longer. And then, let's say I go over here and I turn off A2 and A1 on the record side. Okay, and you might be going, okay, basically you're saying don't bring the audio in. But here's what happens if I do that. If I turn A1 and A2 off, and I hit the insert button. Okay, it inserted the video, pushed all these video tracks down to the right, but it didn't push the audio down. And now my video is out of sync with my audio. And these little numbers here that you are now seeing in these clips in the timeline, in this case mine says minus 66, is how many frames they're out of sync now. So if I play this, my video is going to be out of sync with my audio.
Lunchtime. Just a minute. No. Now. Okay. What is this? Green?
Okay, so obviously no good. So Command Z to undo that. Command Z to undo that. Okay, so when we turn off the track selectors on the record side, the blue track selectors, when we turn this off, we're saying don't bring anything into the timeline. But when they're on, even if we turn A1 off, when you do your edit, they're still editing what's called filler into the timeline. And that's keeping everything in sync. And this is one of the major differences between Avid and the other editing programs, in that this here and this up here on this track, in other programs we would think of that as a gap or an empty space. But Avid thinks of this as an object called filler. And filler is something you can edit into the timeline. It's something you can remove from the timeline. You can even add effects to filler in the video tracks in your timeline. Okay, so when I turn these off and do an insert edit, I'm also saying don't insert filler, and that filler is one of the things that's keeping this in sync. So you're like, oh, I don't want to have to remember to do that, every time. So here's a workaround. These little buttons right here, just to the right of your blue track selectors, these are sync locks. And these will keep all the active tracks in sync if you turn these sync locks on. If you want to turn all of the sync locks on and off at the same time, you can click the sync lock button in the timecode track, and that will turn all of them on or off. So I'm going to turn them all on. I'm going to turn A2 and A1 off again, just to show you that now, if I do an insert, even if these are off, even if those are off, if I do a splice in or an insert, it will keep everything in sync. It will still edit filler into the timeline, even if I've turned those off. Okay, so I'd say most of the time you want to keep your sync locks on and then simply turn them off when they get in the way. Okay, so I'm going to insert a couple of more clips. I'll load this clip in. I'll mark a couple seconds of this. I to mark it in. O to mark it out. My playhead is still at the edit point here. Splice in to cut that in. Now to show you, if our playhead wasn't right at the edit point, if I were to put my playhead in the middle of another clip, let me load something else into the source monitor. I to mark it in. O to mark it out. Once again, my playhead is right in the middle of the clip. If I did a splice in now, it would splice it into the middle of that other clip and push everything else down the timeline.
Lunchtime. Just a minute. No. Now.
Okay, so obviously I don't want that. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm going to Command click to snap my playhead to the edit point before that first clip. Okay, so now I want to insert, I've got a close-up of her feet as she's walking, and I'd like to kind of start the scene with that. So I'm going to go to my Scene 20 clip spin, and we're going to go to 20F take 3. 20F take 3.
Scene 20F take 3.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to mark a couple seconds of that. So I'm just going to mark an in, mark an out. I do want the audio from that. I do want those footsteps. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn A1 and A2 back on. Make sure all my other track selectors are on. And then I'm going to splice in or V on my keyboard. Inserts that clip, pushes everything else down to the right. I'm going to drag my playhead back. Check it.
Lunchtime. Just a minute. No, now.
Okay. What is this? Green tea. But I wanted to...
Okay. So now let's talk about overwrite and how we can basically cover up material in our timeline. So let's go to scene 20G, take 2. And here's a different angle of Tristan walking in and saying her first line.
Scene 20G. Take 2.
So once again, we're going to start walking, then give me a couple beats after action, and then your line. Okay, here we go, and action.
Lunch break.
Okay, so let's do this. I know I want this, I'm going to want this clip to end with her saying lunch break.
Lunch break.
Okay, so I'm going to mark an out right there. I'm going to mark an out right there. I'm just going to leave that like it is. Then I'm going to go down to my timeline, and I'm going to find what I want to replace in the timeline. So it's going to be the first part of this clip here. So I'm going to mark an in and an out in the timeline where I want to replace the clip. Pretty much up until now, we've just been using our playhead as our endpoint. But now we're going to specifically mark an in and an out. So I'm going to command click to snap my playhead to the beginning of the clip. I to mark an in.
Lunchtime.
Okay, and I'm going to mark an out right after she says lunchtime. And what I'm doing is I'm setting up what we call a 3-point edit. Let me zoom in a bit here. Okay, so I have just one mark in my source monitor. I have an out point. And then I have an in and an out in the timeline. The in to out in the timeline, if we look up here, is 2 seconds and 1 frame. So starting at this out point, it's going to basically back time the edit, and it's going to take 2 seconds and 1 frame of this clip to fill in this space. We're basically going to overwrite or cover this up. Okay, so once again, V1 is patched to V1, A1 to A1, A2 to A2, they're all on. And now I'm going to hit the red overwrite button, or B, on my keyboard. And that overwrites the clip into the timeline. I'm going to drag my playhead back and check it.
Lunch break.
Just a minute.
No, now.
Okay.
Okay, so now, that worked out pretty well. But now let's do another approach. I have another shot of Rory saying just a minute, where she peeks her head around the corner. So let's go to 20H take 2, but we're going to approach this a little differently. Let's first of all play it. She does it a couple times here. So let's watch that first. Let's lean out from it again just so I can get ready. Good, very good. Okay, and action.
Lunch break.
Just a minute.
Okay, keep it rolling. Okay, and one more time, action.
Lunch break.
Just a minute.
Okay, so I'm going to mark that.
And
Okay, so I'm going to mark an in.
Just a minute.
And as she starts to go back in, I'm going to mark an out. But now, if I were to just try to overwrite that, it might be a little hit and miss. It may work, it may not. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to remove that same part that's already in the timeline and then splice this back in. So here's how we can remove it. So it's going to be the beginning of this clip here.
Just a minute.
No. Now.
Okay, so it's the just a minute. So I'm going to command click to snap to the head of the clip. I'm going to hit I to mark an in.
Just a minute.
And then I'm going to hit O to mark an out. And what I want to do is I want to remove this and then insert this. So to remove this, I already showed you this earlier, we're going to do what's called an extract. An extract is going to remove whatever's between the in and out points and close the gap. We have another function called a lift, which is this weightlifter button right here. That will lift whatever's between the in and out points, but it will leave filler. Okay, but in this case, we're going to do an extract. So I click extract. It removes whatever's between the in and out points, closes the gap. Playhead stays right there. So now I can go up here and I can splice that new clip back in. And then I'm just going to drag my playhead back and check it.
Lunch break.
Just a minute.
No. Now.
Okay. What is this? Green tea.
Okay, and that's how I can go about removing and replacing clips in the timeline in a very basic manner. So now, let's talk about some reaction shots. I want to add some reaction shots to my timeline. So I'm going to go down here to the scale bar. I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so I can see everything. And more than likely, these longer clips like here, 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 and maybe over here, probably we want to cut to the other person. Whoever's talking, we want to cut to the other person that's listening, throw a little reaction shot in. Okay, so I'm going to play through a couple of these clips, and I'm going to find places that I think are appropriate to put in a reaction shot.
I wanted a Coke.
Soda's bad for you. Plus, you've been looking a little puffy lately.
Okay, right there. She said, you've been looking a little puffy lately. This is a good place to put in a reaction shot of Rory reacting to that line. So,
Soda's bad for you. Plus, you've been looking a little puffy lately.
Okay, right about there where she says puffy. I'm going to mark an in.
Lately, this is better for you. Trust.
I'm going to mark an out. And I'm basically marking the area in the timeline where I want the reaction shot to go. Okay, now let's go find one of Rory's medium shots. Oh, we could use close-ups too, but I'm going to go for the medium shot. And let's find her reacting to that puffy line.
Now.
Okay. What is this?
Green tea.
But I wanted a Coke.
No. Soda is bad for you. You've been looking a little puffy lately. This is better. Trust me.
Okay, right there. So
Hands are right up.
I'm going to back it up. And I'm going to put my playhead just before she looks down. Okay, so here's a case where you want to manually clear your in and out points. So I already have in and out points in this clip. I want to clear them out. I can either click the Clear Both Marks button or hit the letter G on my keyboard. That'll clear those out. Now, here's another big difference between Avid and some of the other editing programs. In Avid, if you don't mark an endpoint in your source clip, your playhead is your endpoint. Okay, most other programs, if you don't mark an endpoint, will take the clip from the head of the clip. But Avid, your playhead is your endpoint. So I can just leave my playhead there, and this will still serve as a 3-point edit. If you want to, if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and mark it in, but you don't have to. Okay, I'm going to leave my play there. I'm not going to mark it in just so we can see that this is going to work. But now we need to pay attention to the patch panel because I want to overwrite this reaction shot up onto the video 2 track. And I don't want anything to overwrite what's already in the timeline here. Okay, so I'm going to start by turning my blue track selectors off for A2, A1, and V1. And you'll see that the area between the in and out points on those tracks is no longer highlighted. Okay, these are not going to be affected by the edit. And my video 1 source automatically jumped up to the video 2 track because that's the only active track. This is called auto patching. Now, if you wanted to patch it yourself, you can actually click in the middle of your green video 1 track and drag, and that'll give you an arrow, and you can point it to the track you want it to go to. And basically we're saying when we do this edit, we want this video clip to go up here onto the video 2 track. Okay, so I've turned all my blue track selectors off except for video 2. The time code, it doesn't matter if it's on or off. Okay, so video 2 and V1 is patched to video 2. I'm now going to do an overwrite or hit B on my keyboard. And that's going to edit that clip onto the video 2 track. I'm going to drag my playback and check my work.
What is this? Green tea. But I wanted a Coke.
Soda's bad for you. Plus, you've been looking a little puffy lately. This is better for you. Trust me.
Okay, and that's a, pretty good reaction shot there. Okay, so once again, we use the patch panel over here to not only determine what tracks are going to go into the timeline, but where they're going to go into the timeline. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple more of those.
Where's Hal?
He's out with John and Vincent.
Why do you let him do that to you?
What?
Dump all the work on you?
He doesn't.
He's never here.
He works at night.
Really?
Yes, it's true. He finishes projects from the day before and starts on new projects for the next day. Sometimes I think he just leaves because the sun is coming up.
You're such an apologist for him.
Okay, so right here, once again, kind of in the middle of this, we'd like to cut to Tristan reacting. Okay, so I'm just going to mark an in and an out.
Yes, it's true. He finishes projects from the day before
We'll say right about here, I'm going to hit I to mark an in,
and starts on new projects for the next day.
O to mark an out. Let's find a good reaction of Tristan. So once again, there are already in and out points in this clip. I'm going to hit G on my keyboard to clear them out, or I could hit the clear both marks button. I'm going to drag my playhead back, find the line.
What is this?
Okay, so
He's out with John and Vincent.
Why do you let him do that to you?
What?
Dump all the work on you?
He doesn't.
He's never here.
He works at night.
Really?
Yeah, it's true. He finishes projects from the day before and sets up projects for the next day.
okay, right there, she does that little eye roll.
Yeah, it's kind of the
So I'm going to back it up. Once again, I could just leave my playhead there, but I'm going to hit I to mark an in. And I've set up a 3-point edit. I have an in and an out in the timeline. If I click on my timeline or my record monitor, I can see that I've marked an area of 2 seconds and 12 frames. Meaning when I do my edit, starting at this endpoint, it's going to take 2 seconds and 12 frames of this clip to fill in this space. Video 1 is still patched to video 2. They're both on. All my other blue track selectors are off, basically saying don't bring anything into the other tracks. I'm going to hit the red overwrite button, or B, on my keyboard. I'm going to drag my playhead back, and I'm going to check it.
Yes, it's true. He finishes projects from the day before and starts on new projects for the next day. Sometimes I think he just leaves because the sun is coming up.
You're such an apologist for him.
Okay, and there's the reaction. Okay, once again, I'm going to do 2 or 3 more of these. So I'm going to play through to the next kind of longer clip.
Taking advantage of you.
No, he isn't. He isn't.
You know what I say?
What?
I say you open your own business. You're too good to be working for someone who slacks off and leaves you to do all the work.
That's...
Okay.
You know what I say?
What?
I say you...
Okay, we'll say right about here. I'm going to hit I to mark it in.
In your own business. You're too good to be working for someone.
O to mark it out. Let's find a good reaction shot of Rory.
This is better. Trust me.
He just leaves because the sun is coming up.
Why are you such an apologist for him? I think he's taking advantage of you.
He doesn't. He doesn't.
You know what I say?
What?
I say you open your own business. You're too good to work for someone who slacks off any chance.
Okay, right there. Okay, so I like that. So right before she kind of turns her head, gives that little sigh, I'm going to leave my playhead right there. Once again, double check my patch panel. Still where I want it. I'm going to hit B on my keyboard or overwrite. Drag my playhead back and check it.
You know what I say?
What?
I say you open your own business. You're too good to be working for someone who slacks off and leaves you to do all the work.
That's not how it is.
Okay, so I'm going to do the next one a little differently. I'm going to put a reaction shot over this clip over here.
Already told you we split the work equally. Really?
Sure.
Really? If Hal could work for 24 hours, I'm sure he would.
Oh, yes. He's such a saint. You know, I bet he never even leaves. He probably crawls under desk and sleeps.
Okay, right here, I can hear that she kind of laughs. I'm not going to do it over the laugh because, you know, this isn't probably not going to line up with exactly where she does it. So maybe I'll do it a little bit before that.
You know, I bet he never even leaves. He probably...
Okay, we'll say maybe right about there. We might play around with it. But I'm going to mark it. I'll use the same clip.
Someone who slacks off any chance he gets and leaves you to do all the work.
That's not how it is. I already told you we split the work equally. Really?
Sure.
Really? If Hal could work for 24 hours, I'm sure he would.
Oh, yes. He's a saint. Maybe he didn't leave it all.
Okay, right there. So this time I'm going to mark an endpoint. But I'm going to click and drag it to the in and out. I'm going to click and drag it to the in and out, and then when I get it close, I'm going to hold down the command key, and that will basically force it between the in and out points. Okay, still setting up a 3-point edit. I'm still doing an overwrite. I'm just doing more of a drag and drop overwrite. So I click, drag. When I get it close, oops, take a look at that. As I drag it, it's bringing in both the video and the audio. So I don't want to do that. Let's pull this back up here, release the mouse, and that's because I wasn't paying attention to my patch panel. Okay, even though A1 and A2 are turned off, when you're dragging and dropping, it's going by the green track selectors. So I need to turn the green A1 and A2 off. Now I can click and drag. It's only bringing the video, and when I get them near the in and out points, I hold down the command key. And check that out. It's forcing it in between the in and out points. Gonna drag my playhead back and check it.
Oh, yes. He's such a saint. You know, I bet he never even leaves. He probably crawls under...
Oh, she started to laugh there at the end. So here's what I could do with that. I'm going to clear my in and out points. I could undo that and kind of redo it. But instead, I was about to show you guys a couple of other tools anyway. As we mentioned at the beginning of the class, we've got these segment modes and these trim tools. Okay, the segment modes allow you to click on clips in the timeline and drag them around. Okay, and there are actually two of these segment modes. There's a red arrow, but if we right click, there's also a yellow arrow. The red arrow is for overwrite. So if you click and drag, you're basically going to be overwrite wherever you drop the clip. The yellow one is for inserting. So we want the overwrite. I'm going to check the red arrow. I'm going to turn that button on, and I can now grab that clip and I can drag it around the timeline. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag it a little bit over to the right as she starts to laugh here, and that should line up with the laughing in the clip. Let's look at it.
Such a saint. You know, I bet he never even leaves. He probably crawls under desk and sleeps.
Close. I might need to push it back just a little bit.
Such a saint. You know, I bet he never even leaves. He probably crawls under desk and sleeps.
See, and I made that work. okay, with just these tools here. Once again, there's probably better ways I could have done that, but this gives me an opportunity to show you that we've got these segment modes here that allow you to click on clips in the timeline. You can click on them, delete them, click on them, drag them around if you're more of a mouse-based editor. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. Okay, so we've got one more clip here at the end that's really long that I'd like to put in a couple of more shots. Okay, so I'm going to play it.
Whenever he gets tired.
No. That's weird. Your mind's not working right.
Or maybe it works too well.
What is this?
A veggie burger.
But I wanted a hamburger.
No, you didn't. This is better.
What, is this one of those fake meat pretend burgers?
No, I don't trust those. This is true veggie.
Okay, so this is lasting kind of long. And usually I would try to find a couple of other shots to put in there and kind of trim it down. But I'm just going to put in a couple of more. I'm going to put in a reaction shot and then kind of a cutaway. So as she's pulling the containers out of the bag, I'm going to mark an in and an out. And we should have a shot, one of Tristan's close-ups. We're at the end. She's kind of looking proud of herself. So I'm just going to play it, see if I can find that.
No, you didn't. This is much healthier. Trust me.
Okay, that right there. Okay, so I'm going to clear these in and out points. I'm going to hit this button right here, clear both marks, or G on my keyboard. I'm going to hit J to back this up a bit. I to mark an in. I've set up my 3-point edit, but I need to pay attention to my patch panel. So once again, video 1, green source, needs to patch to blue video 2 track. And then I need to turn the other tracks off because I only want to overwrite the video, not the audio. And then I'm going to hit the overwrite button, or B on my keyboard. Drag my player back and okay, and then I've got a close-up of her picking up the hamburger. So I'm going to mark where I want this to go in the time. Actually, you know, I'm not going to mark it. I'm going to command click to put my playhead right there. Okay, so we're just going to have using our playhead as our endpoint. I have a close-up of the burger. Okay, and we'll say maybe, let's try to mark an in and an out, like so. I've done a 3-point edit, but I've done it a little differently. This time I just have an in point in my timeline and an in and an out in my source. Once again, video 1 is patched to video 2. The other blue track selectors are off. I'm going to overwrite. This might not line up. Yeah, it's a little off there. It really should end closer to there. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to undo this. And it would have been better to do a 3-point edit in the timeline. Now, as I've mentioned over and over again, there are other ways to do this. There's other ways I could trim that out and fix that. Okay, for this basic class, we're going to do it this way. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to clear my endpoint, because I like where this is ending, but I really don't know where it needs to start in order to fill in the space that I want. So I want to clear my endpoint. D, the letter D on your keyboard clears the endpoint. D clears the in, F clears the out, G clears both. Okay, and then I'm going to go back down to my timeline, mark an in, And okay, right there is when the burger's coming up, and I'm going to mark an out. Okay, so I've set up my 3-point edit. I'm back timing this one because I know where it wants to end, or where I want it to end. I'm going to do an overwrite. Okay, now let's check it. Oh, look at that. Okay, anytime you find yourself pausing, hit Command S to save your work. Command S to save your work. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim a couple of these clips down. Then we're going to take a break. And when we come back from break, we're going to talk about adjusting audio levels and exporting. Okay, but I want to talk about doing a little bit of basic trimming here. So I'm going to go to the beginning of my sequence. I'm going to zoom in on these first few clips here. I'm going to show you two different ways that we could trim these down. So I play these clips, and these first few clips, they're a little long. And I like to trim them down, make them shorter. Here are ways we can do this. Okay, so first of all, this first cat clip. Let's say I want to get rid of the first third of the clip. Well, I could do this. I could drag my playhead to the beginning of the clip, hit I to mark an in, drag my playhead about a third of the way into the clip, O to mark an out, and then I can turn all of my blue track selectors back on. All that area is highlighted that I want to get rid of, and I hit the extract button, that button with the scissors, or X, on my keyboard. And I've trimmed the head of that clip. That clip is now much shorter. Okay, now let's say I want to trim the last third of this clip. Okay, here's how I want to do that. I'm going to put my playhead about a third of the way from the end of the clip, and I'm going to hit I to mark an in. But when we mark an out, we want to make sure we snap to the tail of this clip before we mark our out point. So as I mentioned before, command clicking will snap you to an edit point. And what it's doing is it's snapping your playhead to the head of a clip. But if you want to snap your playhead to the tail of the clip, you hold down Option, Command, and click. Okay, so I Option, Command, click on the tail of the clip, O to mark an out, make sure all my track selectors are on, and I hit Extract or X on my keyboard. And I have trimmed the tail of that clip. Those first two clips are now much shorter. Okay, but here's another way we can do it. We can add an edit to a clip and then delete the part we don't want. Okay, so here's how to do that. Let's say I want to split this clip in half and then delete the second part of it. Well, here's how we add an edit. First of all, the add edit is going to go wherever your playhead is across all active tracks. So before I add an edit here, I'm going to turn off video 2, audio 1, audio 2. So only my video 1 track is on, and it's only going to split that clip. I put my playhead where I want to add the edit, and then we click this button right here, Add Edit. And when I do, it splits the clip. And if you look, there are two little white lines, two little white dash looking things right there. And that's letting you know that this is what's called a match frame edit. It's frame to frame on both sides of the edit. So if you were to drag your playhead back and play it and look at your record monitor, you would have no idea that there's an edit there. Okay, because it's a match frame, or what you might call a through edit in other editing programs. Okay, now I want to delete this part of the clip. And this is where we can use our segment modes. Now the red arrow segment mode, if I click it, this is called the lift overwrite segment mode. And if I grab my red arrow, the lift overwrite segment mode, click on a clip and hit delete, it's going to delete the clip, but it's going to leave filler. It lifts the clip, but leaves filler. Okay, that's not what I want here. I want to close that gap. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo. I'm going to go up to my segment mode. I'm going to right click. I'm going to uncheck the red arrow, I'm going to check the yellow arrow, and then I'm going to click off of the menu. And now my yellow arrow segment mode is selected. This is called the Extract Splice In segment mode. So now if I click on a clip with this tool and hit delete, it will delete the clip and close the gap. But oh, look at that. It deleted it, but it pulled all of these other tracks down. Okay, so it knocked it out of sync. Okay, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo. Okay, so once again, I undo that because even though the sync locks are on, they don't recognize this tool for doing that. What it wants to do is it wants to remove the same amount of material across all these tracks. So here is the better way to do that in this case. So once again, it does delete it, it does close the gap, but because I have got all these other things on the other tracks, it knocks it out of sync. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo, and we're going to do this instead. I'm going to turn that off, put my playhead over that clip, make sure that only the video 1 track is active, and then I'm going to hit this button right here, or T on my keyboard. And that is the keyboard shortcut for Mark Clip. And that'll mark an in and an out around the clip underneath the playhead. Once I mark that, I can turn A1 and A2 back on, and then I can hit Extract or X on my keyboard, and that will remove whatever's between the in and out point and close the gap. Now, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to turn Video 2, Audio 1, and Audio 2 off, and I'm going to do that again. And this time it removes it and it keeps everything in sync. And that's because my sync locks are on. Okay, so whereas my Extract Splice In segment mode, this yellow arrow doesn't recognize that, the extract function will. Okay, so it's a little tricky. It's a little hard to kind of wrap your head around the first time. And this is why I really prefer, in a lot of cases, just to mark clips and extract them than to use this tool to delete them, because you have to be careful about how to remove everything across all the tracks. Now, here's one way I could have done it. This is kind of taking a little sidetrack here, but I'm going to undo that. I'm going to clear my in and out points, G. I've added the edit here. Now, I could do this. I could command click to snap to the edit. Turn Video 2, Audio 1, and Audio 2 back on. And then I could click the Add Edit button. And that will also add an edit to the filler. Then I could command click to snap to this edit point, click Add Edit, and then that would add an edit that lines up with that clip in the filler again. Then I could grab my segment mode, click here, shift click, shift click, shift click, hit delete. Deletes all the selected filler and clip, closes the gap, keeps everything in sync. I think that's a really long, convoluted way to do it. Okay, but that really kind of demonstrates what we're doing here and the way this works. Okay, so that's a quick demonstration of how to remove stuff from the timeline. Now I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go to the beginning of my sequence. We're going to play this, and we're going to see what we have so far.
Lunch break!
Just a minute.
No, now.
Okay. What is this?
Green tea.
But I wanted a Coke.
Soda's bad for you. Plus, you've been looking a little puffy lately. This is better for you. Trust me. Where's Hal?
He's out with John and Vincent.
Why do you let him do that to you?
What?
Dump all the work on you?
He doesn't.
He's never here.
He works at night.
Really?
Yes, it's true. He finishes projects from the day before and starts on new projects for the next day. Sometimes I think he just leaves because the sun is coming up.
You're such an apologist for him. He's taking advantage of you.
No, he isn't. He isn't.
You know what I say?
What?
I say you open your own business. You're too good to be working for someone who slacks off and leaves you to do all the work.
That's not how it is. I already told you we split the work equally. Really.
Sure.
Really, if Hal could work for 24 hours, I'm sure he would.
Oh, yes. He's such a saint. You know, I bet he never even leaves. He probably crawls under desk and sleeps whenever he gets tired.
No. That's weird. Your mind's not working right.
Or maybe it works too well.
What is this?
A veggie burger.
But I wanted a hamburger.
No, you didn't. This is better.
What, is this one of those fake meat pretend burgers?
No, I don't trust those. This is true veggie.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break. And in the next part of the class, we're going to do a little adjustment on the audio, kind of make the audio sound a little nicer. And then we're going to talk about how to export this so people can take a look at your work. See you guys in a few minutes.